Ask yourself, is your taste actually yours? Or how does culture shapes cravings and identity? And by that I mean, have you ever craved something that doesn't make sense? Like, ¿por qué será? De la nada, on a busy Tuesday, you start daydreaming about tamales con café de la olla. That one con extra ceniza on the top, or pan con tomate, but with that very grassy olive oil. And it just feels right. Or does it? O quizás you're thinking about this rinconcito, small space, una memoria en la cocina, where you just haven't been in years, maybe even at all. Algunos may say it's random, but it's not. It's never random. Los antojos, o sea, cravings, they're memories, recuerdos de cultura, identity, también ancestral remembrance. Think of them as the ghosts of meals past. Esos que vienen y te dan that little message on the side of your ears saying, don't forget your generation, or they bring back those memories, unforgettable moments that you may or may not want to taste. Así que hoy we'll be talking a little bit more about that today. Now, if you're new here, bienvenidos, enchanté, and mucho gusto. I would encourage you to go back and check out last week's episodes where we laid the foundation, the groundwork about sabor and sazón, on how our raíces are tied into our flavor and how seasoning, o sea, sazón, defines each and every one of them. Today, we're going to go a little bit more into how el sabor forms us, not just physically, but emotionally, socially, even spiritually. We're going to be asking esa pregunta, is taste actually yours? Or has it been manipulated? O sea, does your taste reflect your embodied culture?
Hello, y welcome to Global Roots Rambles, Spanglish Culture y Comida Sustentable. Soy Dennis Arvizu, your host, y charlador de confianza, guiding you through this jornada where we blend sabores, stories, and sustainability. Aquí exploramos how the food choices we make shape our culture, nourish the world, as well as those around us. Ya sea en la cocina o en el estudio, everyone has a seat at the table, así que tomen asiento, and let's get this ramble started.
So, what does taste say about you? ¿Por qué do you sometimes crave these sabores that were loved by your abuela, abuelo, tía, tíos, someone in that distant past? As we grow up, we think of taste about what just hits the tip of our tongue. It's como un almanaque de sabores, right? A simple map of sweet, salado, agrio, bitter, and yes, even umami. But taste is mucho más que eso. Our taste buds, they're wrapped in memorias, wrapped in rituals, envueltos in our individual sazón, o sea, identity. Cada bocadillo, every bite we take, it's a bookmark into our personal and cultural beginnings. It's our story. Simona Stano tiene un libro called Food for Thought, and she talks about como el sabor, taste, is this embodied culture. To reflect on that one for a minute. ¿Qué quiere decir? What does embodied culture mean? It means that cultura isn't just this set of abstract ideas, beliefs that we hold en nuestras mentes. Es algo that we experience, expresamos, and passes down through our individual selves. Embodied culture is rooted in the way that how you hold your fork, how you dress, the brands you wear, or the brands you seek. Y yes, claro, la comida que se te antoja. Now, these aren't all just personal quirks, son expresiones physical, culturales. Think of your body como una walking, talking biblioteca, but that it's edible. It's a library of your heritage, of your cultural roots, your beginnings. So when you or I crave ese café de la olla con extra ceniza, or los frijoles con un poco de pasote, or quizás just the chicha morada, ice cold in the middle of a winter day, no es just because it tiene buen sabor. It's because it's a call from your biological sense of remembrance. Essentially, nuestro sazón reminds us of who we are. It's engraved, embodied in our DNA. Es ese sabor de la casa, that flavor of home. A la vez, there is science that goes deeper into this. It's called epigenetics. Y básicamente, it's the idea that a lot of our ancestral experiences, joys, traumas, they're all engraved in our own gene, personal DNA. So maybe that one dish that you hardly ever eat gives you this certain craving, but it could also be a message from the roots of your past. If we talk about immigrant communities or diaspora communities, the ones that have migrated from their homeland and have scattered across the globe, this idea of embodied culture becomes even more potent, más poderoso. We start thinking about how taste, this idea of flavor and home, becomes even more potent, more tangible. Taste is oftentimes the last, most stubborn connection, connecting us to that place we may no longer see, be accepted in, or be able to call home. Claro, we may trade off that fluency for some of those favorite sayings like a lo pobre or chinga tu madre or, nice things like that. Or even our accent may change. They might soften, might get stronger. Pero that antojo for that odd smell, familiar smell in la cocina, that one that filled your abuela's house, your neighbors. Estamos hablando that, when you're making that mix of masala or something that, fuck, you never knew what that was, but it can never leave it. And that craving, it becomes this form of resistencia, kind of a quiet rebellion, if you may, a rebellion against assimilation. Esencialmente, it's our sazon trying to stay alive through our sabor, our roots. Y a la vez through the act of choosing specific ingredients that recall, carry significance, that memory, it means that we are choosing not to forget. O sea, esas memorias or that embodied culture se vayan al olvido. Pero también you gotta also be mindful that sometimes un antojo is grief and bring you back to those times of a person that is no longer here, a person that used to cook for you or you can no longer cook for. Pero it's those times, those memories, those dishes that you take in remembrance of the person, Think of El Dia de los Muertos. Another way could be, hey, homesickness. Think if you have been a person that's been ousted out of your community, out of your homeland, this homesickness can come with just a simple spoon, where cada mordida, cada bocadillo is both painful yet comforting, almost sweet and sour, yin and yang, if you may. So let's switch over to hunger. Are you just hungry, or is my culture driving those antojitos, my cravings? Let's be honest, no todos los antojos are sacred. Tienen ese mensaje ancestral. Today, sometimes we might see esa bolsa de takis, red hot Cheetos, calling your name, or los churros, paletero man. Pero even those antojos carry a backstory, ¿no? And every time I see a bag of hot Cheetos, I do remember when they barely came out in the early 90s, when people were really baffled by what they were. Nowadays, you see that and it's like you're more surprised when you don't see them on the shelf. So I guess where I'm going with that is how did we normalize this craving for the cacharra, right? The processed foods, the comida rápida, just those sugar bombs that leave us feeling empty or drained after like an hour. It's algo muy simple in reality. Our palates have been colonized, if you may, with billions and billions of dollars in what we call marketing. It's this marketing culture that has slowly colonized and influenced flavors of today. Hace unas semanas atrás, I believe it was like in the second episode or so, hablamos about food systems and this illusion of choice. Now hay que agregarle una etapa más in the sense that nuestros antojos, our cravings, they're trained, they're manipulated and reinforced. Igual como the colonization de las Americas, it wasn't just about land and labor. It was about food, la comida. It was where things were introduced, como la azúcar refinada, la harina de trigo, processed oils, and how these items systematically displaced those nutrient-dense indigenous staples. Estamos hablando de el amaranth, la chia, right? Esos hundreds of varietals of elote, corn, or patatas. Over the generation, our palates have been retrained to prefer these colonized, o sea, marketing diets. So yeah, does it sound like everything is negative and you can take it like it is? Well, there is good news to it. I think the positive thing here is how do we reframe it? How do we become aware of this training, of this rewiring? How our tastes have slowly been manipulated and how we can bring them back. Now, I'm not talking about, dejen los hot Cheetos or because a la vez they have their own cultural context. They have their own memories, kind of like I was saying of my own. And so this is where the idea of comida sustentable, the sustainable food, becomes this powerful act of decolonization, palettes of the past. Estamos hablando how we choose to eat, the act of eating sustentable. It's that physical act that reflects on our valores, cultural values. Cuando tú purposely or consciously eliges productos, alimentos that are locally sourced and organically, estación, produced ethically, estás haciendo this embodied choice. You're purposely making this commitment that is both environmental and socially just. That's that embodied culture. Ese sazón. So what does this mean? This means learning or becoming aware de por qué we crave certain foods, o sea, también on why we get curious to reclaim others. This means going to the local mercado instead of the supermarket, asking your vendor about those strange looking vegetables. Oftentimes, the stranger, the uglier they are, the better they taste. This also means, hey, planting esa olla de cilantro or hierbabuena on your windowsill or en la yarda. A la vez, it's finding the little joys in ese simple bowl of lentejas, dal, o ese café de la olla, pero con un toque de tu sazón. Estos sustainable practices oftentimes are rooted in tradition and indigenous knowledge. Bringing them back to life, o sea que pa que revivan, it isn't just about eating healthier. It's about reclaiming our cultural heritage, nuestras raíces, our food sovereignty, as well as honoring that deep understanding of the roots passed down through generation after generation. Y al fin, you may realize now that that comfort food that you so much desire, que se te antoja, no solamente it's about the calories, but it's about that comfort that comes with it. Estamos hablando de the laughter in the kitchen, ese plato passed around the table, esa receta passed down generation to generation that may not be written anywhere. Says al puro tanteo. But it comes back to that feeling of being cared for, that sense of belonging. Así que la pregunta es, ¿tienes hambre? Or are you remembering? Or whose story are you tasting? So what does our craving say about you, about me? Our taste, it's not neutral. Es un almanaque about our lives, kind of like that almanaque of el tomate and then molcajete. Es un reflejo de nuestra niñez, nuestra cultura, our history. Yes, sometimes refleja un trauma, sometimes alegría, y a la vez can offer both. Esta idea de embodied culture va más allá que la comida. Beyond, think of Spanglish. For those of us who speak it, like myself, the choice of which language to use or how to blend the two is often unconscious. It's this embodiedly act. It's a physical shift in the mouth with a different kind of breath, gesture, pero that only makes sense with esa cierta palabra, that word that embodies expression, that dual identity of belonging to multiple communities a la vez. Hoy en día, we're in a world that pressures us to choose una cultura over the other. Pero for me, embracing Spanglish es un acto de resistencia. It's my way of saying I'm both, and my embodied culture is a testament. And we can say the same sobre la comida. You know, we think about why certain communities still crave masa, ají amarillo, plátano, lentejas, o quizás por qué the smell of mole transports somebody back to ese apartamento in Brooklyn, or el festival in Puebla, or the street foods of Mumbai. It's these antojos, these cravings that have become this memory of codes, simbolismo. Son historias, but edible. What's the food that makes you feel the most like yourself? In other words, ¿cuál comida tiene tu sazón? The one that defines who you are. Pero here's another one. Most importantly, I feel, is what have you stopped craving through those societal pressures of feeling ashamed, of craving something that could be too authentic, too a lo pobre, too smelly. Ese, ay, que asco, or the hell do you eat that? Maybe it's too weird. The thing is that we shouldn't allow those societal pressures to take those cravings to el olvido. We need to reclaim them. We need to honor the ancestral hunger that came with them. O sea, those humble beginnings, even if they were a lo pobre. And how do you do that? Pues ask your elders, los abuelos, you know, for their recipes. And hopefully you're able to write them down and no son de esos del puro tanteo. And if they are, well, write down the stories that come with them. What is their symbolism? What is their meaning? We have to think about our kitchens, our meals, our embodied culture in this living archive, este archivo that builds comunidad. Pero a la vez, it's this herramienta that's powerful in ways of expressing our identity, creando comunidad, y a la vez creating this estilo de vida sustentable. Uno that we want to remember. But at the same time, that helps us continue to build ese sazón y quizás reclaiming that cultural awareness that we so much desire in the future.
With you. Ya sea una palabra, una idea, un sabor, take it with you. Compártelo en tu próxima comida. And subscribe to follow us on your favorite podcast platform, ya sea video or audio. Aquí no se trata de ser perfectos, se trata de ser conscientes y dejar que nuestras decisiones hablen con sabor y propósito. We'll see you on the next ramble.